Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this show, please give us some feedback and leave us a 5-star rating. Or if you want to give us other feedback, we're happy to hear that too. Whatever it takes to make the show better, we want to hear from our listeners so we know what you're looking for and make sure we can help. And if you have not already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Todd Sulzinger. Todd Sulzinger is a former Silicon Valley finance executive turned real estate investor with a focus on the growing niche of mobile home park investing. His company, Blue Elm Investments, has built the expertise to turn neglected mobile home parks into vibrant communities. Now, Todd is also the co-author of Success Habits of Super Achievers, a #1 Amazon bestseller with secrets, tips, and inspiration to accelerate your success. Let's welcome to the show, Todd Sulzinger.
Hey, John, how are you doing? Thanks so much for having me on your show today.
Absolutely, Todd. Listen, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take a minute or two and give us a little bit more context on your background?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I had spent most of my career working in corporate finance for a variety of different technology companies in the Silicon Valley, out in the Sacramento, California area, and spent a few years living in the UK, helping some European subsidiaries for a company I was working for build out their finance infrastructure, and had a great career. Got to meet a lot of great people, work with a lot of great people, do a lot of traveling, and during the partway during my corporate journey, I just felt like it wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing, and going through another audit, another year in close, another budget cycle. Just I knew that wasn't something I wanted to do forever, and I started to get interested in real estate investing. I started listening to one of the early podcast radio shows with the real estate guys, and through that process, ended up buying some single family homes in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, with that idea that I think a lot of people have, is just I'm going to slowly start to buy these homes and eventually have a big enough portfolio that'll replace my W-2 income, and I'll be able to retire. As I got into that process after buying several homes, I realized it was going to take a long time to actually get there and save up enough money each year to buy another home, and wanted to try to figure out some other way to kind of make a living through real estate investing, knowing I didn't want to be a real estate agent. And then through the real estate guys, actually I came across their Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar, and started to meet a lot of other people in that syndication world who were raising money from investors to buy bigger deals than they would otherwise. And that really appealed to me. So I knew I could take the combination of my finance and analytical background with my interest and experience in real estate, and mirror that together to create a business to be able to help passive investors invest in real estate, which is something that I found out a lot of people really want to do, but they're scared off because they don't want to be landlords or just don't know how to get into it.
Yeah, listen, so, great background there, right? So coming from corporate finance, recognizing that, hey, I like this, but this is not really what I want to do the rest of my life. Started looking more into real estate. You buy some single families in Dallas, Fort Worth, and then realize, hey, you know what, there's another way to scale, and started to lean more into syndication. Let's just pick up right there, right? So I know the Real Estate Guys, great radio show and content that they put together. I believe they focus a little bit more on kind of apartment syndication and kind of all sorts of different land type developments and things like that now. Where did you start? So you go from having those single family homes at DFW to realizing that maybe you want to play in the syndication space. Where do you spend your energy? Where do you focus?
Yeah, well, that process actually took me a couple of years to get to that point of deciding kind of which way to go in that business, because I was still working full time at my W-2 job. Realized I wanted to start a syndication business. So the first part of that is to actually start talking to some people that you that to find out, hey, do you have an interest in investing in real estate? Have you ever, heard of this idea of like, crowdfunding, pulling people's funds together and we'll all go in and, buy an asset together. So starting at that point, I then had to figure out what asset class to work in, because people put together deals in mobile home parks, apartments, self-storage, groups of single family homes. So I was really trying to do a lot of analysis on asset classes and markets to look into investing in. And I had always heard mobile home parks kind of on the fringes about it's a great asset class. There's a dwindling supply, still a lot of demand for affordable housing. A lot of the properties are run by mom and pops. They're not efficiently run, so there's more opportunity for upside, but that they can be challenging to manage, and they're not as maybe easy to understand as apartments or single family homes. And through that process, I met a property management mobile home park consulting group that had a lot of experience in this space, manages about 80 plus parks across the country. And once I met them and kind of found out what they could do, then I decided to really focus on mobile home parks because I, had a partner that had experience in that business that could kind of guide me through the process and lend some of the mobile home park specific experience that I didn't have outside of my general real estate experience.
So you were kind of interested in mobile home parks from the beginning, but not to the point where you were like, this is going to be my focus. It really wasn't until you found that partner where you said, okay, this is their expertise. I like mobile home parks enough to jump into this. Now we're going to move, full forward, focusing on mobile home parks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there were a lot of things that I liked about it. I wanted to. It's nice to have a differentiator. I didn't want to be another apartment syndicator because that was something that there was a lot. It seemed like there was a lot of competition in that space. Whenever I had some initial conversations with people about mobile home parks, they were really interested. Like, oh, okay, like I think I've seen those. Oh yeah, I think there's one down the street from me. But how do those work? And who owns the houses? Does the park? Do the tenants? So I knew I was able to capture people's attention and be able to differentiate myself compared to a lot of other people putting together real estate deals out there.
Yeah, so you make that decision to partner with them on mobile home parks. Walk me through the first deal. Like, what's that like?
Once I decided to focus in on that, it was really starting with contacting the brokers in the mobile home park business. And there's a handful of them out there that focus on it. There's a lot of other commercial brokers that periodically get listings. So a lot of it was just like starting down that analysis path, which was, similar to, what I'd heard in other real estate asset classes was, you might look at 100 deals and maybe make offers on 10 and close on one. So it was just looking at a lot of different deals and a lot of different markets. And through that process, you learn so much about the business and what separates mobile home parks from other types of assets in terms of whether they're on city water or whether they have a well, whether they're on city sewer or whether they have their own septic systems. So just, a lot of analysis, looking at a lot of different deals, talking to different brokers. And then through that process, ended up finding a park, actually two parks in Georgia that were about a mile from each other. That I liked the market, I liked the potential for the park, and made an offer and got it accepted and closed on it.
No, that's awesome, man. Congratulations on that first deal. Yeah. And you said a couple of things I want to make sure everyone's able to follow, right? So you mentioned when you do your analysis, you're looking at, what kind of water system, city water or well. What exactly does that mean? I mean, because most people living in a house or living in an apartment or even investing in apartments, they know kind of the water that comes from the city, but to have well water is probably a bit of a foreign concept. So can you just maybe elaborate a little bit more there?
Yeah, so that in the mobile home park business, because a lot of times these parks may have been built outside the city limits, maybe sometime in the 50s or 60s or 70s. A lot of times they may or may not be on city utilities. So, kind of the holy grail in the mobile home park business is one where all the utilities are provided by the city. But there's a lot of parks that they're not. So, if a park is not on city water, sometimes they might have their own well. And so that's kind of another layer of, as part of the due diligence process, to figure out, okay, like what's the status? How often is the well been maintained? Does the city or county have certain regulations in terms of testing? Different municipalities have different rules in terms of how clean the water has to be, and that's an issue. Sometimes the wells are running great, no issues. Somebody comes out, tests, and maintains them. Other times, I've heard some operators that have purchased parks with wells where the analysis of the water comes out just slightly over what is allowed. And it can be a huge investment to try to mitigate those risks. So that's just compared to an apartment or a house that would definitely would most likely not have a well that's providing water. It's another level of due diligence that you have to do on the park. Similarly, with the sewer systems, if it's hooked up to city sewer, life is good. That makes it pretty easy. A lot of times parks are not on city sewer, which means they have their own septic systems. And again, if they're well maintained, then and you've got a good provider who can come in and take care of the tanks on a regular basis, they can work fine and not be any issue at all. In those situations, sometimes there's parks where there might be a small septic tank for each home. Other times there might be a larger tank that takes care of multiple houses. So again, it's just another level of due diligence, and it's something you have to look at that you wouldn't have to in other assets.
And then as the owner, you're paying for that cost, right? I'm assuming if it's well water or for the septic tank, if it's not on the city, is that a line item on the expenses that you now need to plan for?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, if it's a well and it's it can be good. I know there's some operators that it's worked out really well from, because it's free water, and depending also on the municipality, they may be able to actually charge residents for that water. But in terms of testing and maintenance, and definitely with the septic system as well, you have to budget for those line items, and also make sure you've got capital reserve set aside just in case there's something where a septic tank might need to be replaced.
Yeah, okay. And as far as those, going back to those first two deals in Georgia, right? As you looked at the market, the deal itself, what are some of the things you're looking for? And how do you figure out this is a good market for mobile home parks, or even metrics on a deal? I mean, or how do you look at the metrics on a deal to know that it is actually a good deal?
Yeah, no, great question. A lot of the mobile home parks that I looked at were not in primary markets. Partly because when I was first starting out, the pricing on those was really high. If the pricing was kind of more in the ballpark I was looking for, they were very small parks. So I was looking for parks that were at least 50 spaces, just to be able to have something large enough to be able to afford an on-site manager and a maintenance person to just kind of have those economies of scale. If you have a park that's too small, it's hard to be able to afford that and manage it remotely. If it's a small park and you're close to it, where you can drive there and do some of the management yourself, definitely more reasonable. So in the mobile home park business, a lot of people kind of look at a metric of trying to find a market that's at least 100,000 people in the metro, with this assumption that's a good guideline to say that there's probably enough economic diversity and a big enough tenant base to kind of keep a good tenant flow during the lifetime that you own the park. So the first park that I bought was in a town called Milledgeville, Georgia, which only had about 60,000 people. So the park looked good. The market was below kind of what would be the industry standard for what parks to look at. But when I dug down a little bit deeper on the market, looking at the economy, looking at some of the economic drivers, it had some things that were better than a typical town of that size. It had 3 colleges in town, had a kind of vibrant downtown, had a couple small manufacturers, had a prison outside of town that was a decent sized employer. And one of the other metrics that people look for is how close is the nearest Walmart supercenter, with this idea that if Walmart did all this market research to put a facility there, there's got to be enough, again, economic drivers and population to drive one of those businesses. This town had a Lowe's and a Walmart. So you think, okay, if Lowe's put a home improvement center in this town, even though it's only 60,000 people, there's enough people in this town and surrounding towns to be able to support a business like that. So sometimes that's, I guess, another thing in the mobile home park business, because sometimes you might find parks that are in secondary or tertiary markets. It's a little bit additional due diligence versus saying, "Hey, I'm, buying a park on the outskirts of Dallas, where it's obvious that it's a big metro with millions of people." So those are some of the key things I looked at from a market standpoint.
No, it's great tips. And I got to tell you, Todd, you might be the first person that I've ever heard seamlessly say, hey, it's got 3 universities here, there's a Walmart, and there's a prison. I've never heard anybody just kind of weave in the prison as an advantage of a market before. But, I guess and I didn't know where you were going either. As an employer, it makes sense. As, hey, here's a great resident base. When these people come out, we got a home for them. I think that's where I thought.
I hadn't thought about it. That's a good point. Well, I know my parents live in Folsom, California, just near Folsom Prison. People say, "Oh, wow, you live close to a prison," and some people say that's the safest place to live because there's so much activity around there that the neighborhoods around prisons are really safe.
Yeah. So with that said, there's a stigma, right? I think that some people have an image of mobile home parks, and maybe it is of, kind of this lower income, I'm going to just say redneck, just like a really down and dirty, environment. And I know that that's not what all trailer or mobile home parks are, but some people see that. As you look at mobile home parks and talking to investors in particular, I'm assuming some people probably ask you about that or maybe have some preconceived notions. How do you address that? And how does what you invest in kind of compare to maybe what the reality or what their perception is?
Yes, yeah, no, great question. It's a shame. Because that perception out there is, there's just a lot of history behind that, or TV shows that you might have seen where people have that impression of what those homes are. But in a lot of parts of the country, these, mobile home parks are just great places for affordable housing. I look in markets where, might have 2-bedroom rents that are $800 or $900 or $3,000 for a 3-bedroom apartment, whereas we rent our mobile homes for between $400 and $600. So if you've got a family that says, okay, I'd like 3 bedrooms, I'd like to be able to drive straight up to my house and have a little yard around me, having a mobile home is a lot better alternative than, say, trying to find an apartment for an equivalent or more cost. Some of the negative stigma is related to just the fact that they're oftentimes not kept up over time. And a lot of that is getting back to the mom and pop ownership, that family may have owned it for 20, 30 years. They may even live in the park. And the park might get paid off. They're making enough money to satisfy their living expenses, but they might not have the kind of capital that somebody might have when somebody like me comes in with an investor group to say, hey, this park needs a couple $100,000 to buy homes to fill empty spaces, or to fix the roads, or add new signs, or put in new fencing, or whatever it might be. So those are, I guess, some of the things that I think about when I look at trying to turn around some of the stereotypes about mobile home parks. Understanding how people view them. I have had some investors that I've talked to, that in the same way they might shy away from a C-class apartment, where they would feel more comfortable investing in a nicer asset, even if the returns are lower. They would look at mobile home parks in that same class to say, I'd rather, stay away from the affordable housing space and lean more towards nicer assets.
Yeah, and some of that is obviously goes back to the perception, right? I mean, for some people, it's important to have, whether it be a trophy asset or something that they can brag to their friends about and show them pictures of. And maybe you don't get that quite as much with mobile homes or some of the more affordable housing options out there. But to your point, I think that there's a wide array of mobile home parks that exist. And in fact, there's some that are more luxury, which I
Hmm.
don't think everyone knows. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of just the scale and how they're actually Class A mobile home parks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in the mobile home park business, they're typically on a 1 to 5 scale. So if you had a 5-star park, it would be something in Florida where it's, 100% tenant-owned homes, beautiful entryway, possibly gated clubhouse, pool, and like really nice amenities. And there's, you find those oftentimes in some of the coastal markets like Florida and California. A 1-star park would be something that's just, you can imagine, more like a C or D class apartment. Most parks kind of fall in the 2 to 3 star range, which are the parks that I own. I mentioned the parks in Georgia I bought were actually 2 parks about a mile from each other. One of them had a fence around it and a sign, and you drove in and you knew you were driving into this mobile home park. The one about a mile away was 23 spaces, and there's no sign, no entrance, didn't really even have a name. It was just in a neighborhood of other single family homes. You drive by and there's a couple acres, had 23 houses on it. And it was that is where it's sitting. So, in situations like that, it looks almost like more like it's a miniature single family home neighborhood than, something that really looks like a mobile home park. But it's nothing fancy. There's no amenities, no clubhouse or anything. It's just similar to a single family home neighborhood where it's just 23 homes sitting next to each other, that some people are renting out the homes, other people own the homes and are just renting out their space.
Yeah, and to that point, like where you mentioned the spaces, right? So spaces, I guess the equivalent from multifamily is units, right? So the spaces are the
Mm-hmm.
number of
Yes.
mobile homes that you can actually have in that park.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're looking at the number of spaces and looking at, those that are resident owned versus those being park owned, what's your preference and what does that mean for someone who's hearing these terms for the first time? Can you explain what that means? And as you, the investors, you look at it, which one's your preference?
Sure. Yeah. So just to kind of get that terminology clear, in a mobile home park, there's individual lots that have sewer and electrical and water connections, and you can either have a situation where somebody owns their own mobile home and they move it into that space and just pay for the lot rent. So they are responsible for all the maintenance around the home, and the park is then responsible for landscaping and any of the infrastructure around the park. And other situations, and actually the one that I prefer is where the park owns the home, where they rent it out similar to renting out a single family home or an apartment. So the positives about that are that we have control over the homes. The income from the home more than offsets the cost of any kind of maintenance that you have on the home. Downside to that is that we do have those kind of maintenance issues that come in the park, and there's a little bit less tenant stickiness. If somebody owns their home, they're much less likely to actually physically move it out of a park somewhere else. Whereas if somebody's renting a home, similar to an apartment, it's much easier for them to pack up and move if they want to.
So a little bit more turnover costs, but the turnover costs, maintenance costs, but the income you get from owning that home directly more than offsets the additional costs you have from owning it. That makes a lot of sense. And you have more control over the overall look and feel of the property. It's not like someone's got their 50-year-old mobile home, just sitting there. That's completely outdated. If you're controlling and owning it, you can make the updates, right?
Yeah, and there's some people that take immaculate care of their homes, and that's great. But there are other times if somebody owns their home and they're not, it's much more difficult to say, hey, you really need to paint your home or fix your skirting or or whatever it might be.
Yeah, makes sense. And then we talked about markets a little bit. You said one of the things that you look for is a metro where there's at least a population of at least 100,000
Mhm.
people. So we are not necessarily talking about large cities, your more secondary, tertiary markets is what we're looking at. For those folks who are wrapping their head around how to approach mobile home investing, let's talk about maybe more of the market criteria. So 100,000 people in the metro is one of the things you look for. Does climate matter? Does population growth matter, or the trajectory there? What else matters, or what else is important as you look at the actual markets for investing?
Yeah, I definitely do look at population and job growth, and also the median price of homes. I look for markets where the price at least between at least $100,000 to $120,000. And then it's really looking for diverse economies. I looked at some parks that may have just had either one big manufacturer in the town, or possibly a military base may have been the primary employer. And those I was scared off from those. You talk to some people in the market, you might talk to the broker, and he would say, "Oh, yeah, this military base has been there forever. It's really strategic. It's never going to move." But things can change, and if I had a primary employer like that, that would potentially shut down, as well as all the jobs that would go with it that support the base, that could be a problem. So it was important to me to find markets where there's a diverse employer base, like some of the things I mentioned in Georgia. The next park I bought was in Tennessee, and that was near it. The closest metro was this town called Jackson, and I drove out there. I was just surprised to see there was Black and Decker and Kellogg, and just a lot of different manufacturers that you kind of knew if there was an economic downturn in one segment of the market compared to the other, there'd still be a diversity of employment that would not cause people to completely move out of the area.
Yeah, so that diversification of employment, that's something we obviously look for in multifamily as well. So sounds like that's really comparable to what you're looking at for the same reasons, right? Any major employer, if they leave an area and they are, pretty much the main employer of an area, you're going to have a huge economic impact, on your property. So that's something that you want to hedge against. If you can find places that are more diverse with their employment base, that's just going to make your life easier. So you're not worried
Mm-hmm.
about what's happening with this one company. We see it here. I mean, I'm in Cincinnati, so it's part of the Rust Belt in the Midwest, and obviously back in the 80s, you saw this happen to a lot of these communities where one major employer would leave, especially in the manufacturing space. So you certainly want to make sure you isolate yourself a bit from those kind of issues. One thing that you said that I thought was pretty interesting, and you do not hear multifamily investors talk this way, but you mentioned that you look for areas where the median home price, was between $100,000 and $120,000. You typically don't hear multifamily investors talk about median home prices. We'll talk about income. We're certainly looking at median incomes, but not so much the median home price. Why is that so important for you?
Well, it's important for one to if home prices are below that mark, it's below far below a national average, which it probably says there's not potentially much room for growth in that market over time. And then also just from if you think about what the rents might be for a home that's that value, or the ability for somebody to buy a home, you don't want to have that the spread between what it costs for somebody to be able to afford a home and potentially buy a mobile home and have it sitting in one of our parks, or rent one. You wouldn't want to have that spread be too large.
Makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, you have to look at someone the way they're looking at it. If their
Yeah,
alternative is to buy a house, then they're probably just going to buy, if they qualify, right? They'll buy a
right.
house, but at least they can rent a house. So I mean, I'm assuming most people, if they could rent a single family house versus renting, a mobile home, they will probably opt for a detached single family house. So that's really your
Yes, right.
competition. So it helps to know where those prices are. And that's probably similar to apartments. If someone had the choice of renting a single family house that, they have their own space and, it's detached
Mhm.
versus renting in an apartment, it probably helps to know what those single family houses rent for, because you're probably not going to be able to get the same amount of rent. So just
Yes,
really good
yes.
point to know that it's good to check on that and just use that as kind of an anchor. That leads me to the question to say, who exactly is your demographic? Again, I know some people have their preconceived notions, but who is your average renter for a mobile park?
It's blue collar employees. So we've got in our parks. There's in the parks in Georgia. There's a nursing home across the street from the park. A few of our tenants work there. They work in restaurants. They work in retail. So it's the the blue collar workers and retail and service workers that fill our parks, and that's kind of from a affordability standpoint. What we really look at is saying that if we can, if you have even two people making minimum wage or $10 an hour, that's $20,000 a year maybe. That even at that wage, they would still be able to afford, say, $400 to $600 rent for a mobile home, even at the lower end of the wage scale. So that's kind of from a recession resistancy standpoint. That's one of the benefits of mobile home parks.
Well, we know affordable housing is one of the things that this country is struggling with. Mobile homes certainly serve as a great alternative. So it's something that people should look at more and consider if it fits their bill. So there's certainly some
Mhm.
opportunities there. The one thing that I heard that I just think is amazing is it's one of the few assets or asset classes that you're actually seeing less supply for because they're not really building many more mobile home parks. You're not seeing new ones come on the market. So, with that, how are
Yes.
you looking at, demand and projecting out 5 years, 10 years, whatever your hold period is, given that, you're not dealing with new construction or some of those other things that maybe folks in the multifamily space are looking into?
Yes, yeah, and that's definitely one of the things I liked about this business was the decreasing supply. There's very few new mobile home parks being built every year, and that's a lot of it's around city zoning and the way property taxes are calculated for homes, and the stigma around not in my backyard. So there's very few new parks built every year, in spite of despite the huge need for affordable housing across the country. And if anything, they're redeveloped for better use, especially in more expensive markets. In California and in the Silicon Valley near where I live, it's not uncommon to see a park be purchased. Again, not for somebody to buy it and continue to run it as a park, but to redevelop it to better use. And then oftentimes there's other just smaller parks that just over time through neglect may disappear over time. So yeah, so it's the only multifamily asset that there's a shrinking supply every year. So that's definitely something that works in the business's favor.
Yeah, and Todd, I know you switching gears here. I know you wrote a number one Amazon book. We just kind of talked about super achievers and super habits. Can you just talk a little bit about one, what sparked you to write this book, and then two, maybe give a couple of insights that either surprised you or surprised many of the readers about what it takes to be a super achiever.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I got involved in this project last year, and it's a collaborative book where myself and 80 other authors, including Robert Helms from Real Estate Guys, some other really iconic thought leaders like Darren Hardy and Dennis Waitley, Les Brown, were involved in the project. And the idea was to have a collaborative book where everybody had their own stories about kind of their journey and some of their success habits that got them to where they were. And I think kind of, reading the book after it came out, I think one of the things that you find most consistently, across people's stories is just their stick to itiveness, just to continue working hard, not giving up, in spite of any kind of obstacles that get in your way, and just continuing to move forward towards your goals.
Yeah, I think that's a huge insight right there, right? No matter what's going on, no matter how down you feel, no matter how defeated you might feel in a moment, those who stick to it, are more likely to overcome. And there's this notion of failing forward that I was introduced to some years back, and I didn't get it at first, to be honest with you. I'm like, dude, no, you fail. Like, what do you mean failing forward? And it took a minute, but the reality is that as long as you have breath in your lungs and you can learn a lesson, you can overcome pretty much anything that happens to you. So if you can take that mindset, that mentality and move forward, you can see success. And it sounds like there are a lot of great authors of, in that book, sharing their insights as well. So definitely want to make sure we check that out. Looks like it's a great book and some great insights within that book.
Yeah, I agree. And if anybody, any of your listeners or watchers want to reach out, the first 5 people that reach out, I'll go ahead and send them out a free signed copy of the book. And for anybody else, I can send out an ebook of my chapter, because I think it's the book has just, again, a ton of great insights, really great authors from Grammy-winning songwriters, Major League Baseball players, Emmy award-winning broadcasters. So a huge slate of people that have a lot of great stories to share.
Well, I think you have 4 books left, Todd, because I certainly want one. So there are 4 left to get from Todd.
Oh,
But Todd,
fair enough.
go ahead and give them your email address so we can make sure they reach out and get their copy of the book.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so my company is Blue Elm Investments. So my email is Todd, Todd, at blueelminvestments.com.
All right, excellent. So email Todd if you want a copy of this book. Great offer right there. Appreciate you offering that to our Target Market Insight listeners. You can email him at Todd at Blue Elm Investments, right? .com?
That's correct, yep.
All right, blueelminvestments.com. Let's go to our bullseye round. You ready?
All right, sure.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Probably with my single family homes that I had in Dallas. I was investing outside my markets. That was a big leap to do that. So great learning experience. But through that process, I had some struggles with even kind of learning how to manage property managers. And there were some times where I relied too much on them and accepted their advice too much, versus what I learned from that was even when you have an outside manager managing your products, your properties, you're still in charge. You still have to make the decisions. And if something doesn't feel right in your gut about one of their decisions, you should feel right to push back and really control the situation better.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that managing the manager is such a critical aspect of it. I think a lot of times, if you're listening to podcasts like this, you'll hear our guests, and it sounds so easy. All you have to do is hire a property manager, and everything is easy after that, right? You don't have to do anything. Well, the reality is that you still need to be the leader. You still need to manage the manager. You still need to drive the vision for what you want to see done. And that takes some work. You can certainly trust and empower a property manager, but at the end of the day, you are the one that's responsible. You're the one that has to make the decisions and steer the ship the way it's going. So, Todd, thanks for sharing that
perfectly
insight.
Said, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Todd, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Let me see. I guess one of the things I've been involved with or been spending a lot more time on recently, I recently joined the Forbes Real Estate Council. So I've been spending a lot of time on that website within the council, just really been turned on to a lot of great writers and other people in the business that I've been learning a lot from. And I found out about that through LinkedIn. Now I'm just going directly to Forbes to look at a lot of their content.
Awesome. It's a great resource right there. All right, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I would say probably a couple that I've gifted and recommended to people. One is The One Thing by Gary Keller. Just a fantastic book that just really talks about how to focus on, try to whittle down everything you've got on your to-do list to focus on certain things that will really move your business forward. And then the second one is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, which is just a fantastic book that just talks about, really tackling some of the most difficult things that you're avoiding early in the day. And treat them like if you can, eat a frog early in the day, that's going to be the worst thing that's going to happen to you. You'll feel better getting it out of the way, and then you can spend the rest of your day being more productive. So that's actually on one of my, often on one of my to-do lists. It's like, okay, how many frogs am I going to eat today, and how am I going to get them done? So, and I think in general, days go better when you can kind of get those hard things out of the way early in the day and put them behind you.
Absolutely. All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
One of the things that I've used the past couple of years is something called the 5-minute journal. And I found out about it on Tim Ferriss's podcast. And I've always struggled with journaling and wondered how I should do it, and had not been consistent about it. But this 5-minute journal is a nice, simple book where the goal is for 5 minutes a day. In the morning and in the evening, spend some time writing down like what you're grateful for, what you can do to, make your day great, and some daily affirmations for the day. And at the end of the day, reflect back on, what amazing things happened to you during the day and what could you have done to make that day better. So having that tool just to know that I can, journal every day, it's not massively time consuming. Just to get in a consistent habit of gratitude for the day, and then reflecting on the day about, again, great things that happened and what possible things I could have done to make it better.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I guess I would say that that it really is possible. I think before, it is possible to follow your dreams and to really make things happen. I think when you're starting, it just seems like the mountain is so high to climb, and there's so many things to work on and get towards. But the closer you get to the top, the easier it gets. And then once you get there and look at everything that went behind you, realize it wasn't that hard. So I think just kind of if I would have been able to accept that it was going to be doable and not as daunting when I started, would have been nice to know.
Todd, what are you curious about right now?
I'm curious to kind of see what happens in the affordable housing and mobile home park space over the next couple of years. It'll be interesting to see just from an economic standpoint, as well as kind of how the mobile home park business fits into the overall real estate market, what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I know we mentioned that you were in Redwood City, so out there kind of close to the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
I would say probably in Redwood City, there's a great little restaurant called Timber and Salt, and the timber is related to the fact that Redwood City here used to have a lot of redwood trees that they used to, they ended up rebuilding San Francisco after the earthquake with, but they've got absolutely the best burger anywhere I've had and make amazing cocktails.
Love it. Sounds like a great place to check out. Todd, a lot of great information, man. I really appreciate you talking to us about your journey, getting into mobile home park investing, dispelling some of the myths that are out there about the space, and just recognizing that there's a lot of opportunity, especially if you're trying to get into affordable housing. Don't look down upon mobile home parks. There's opportunities there. You just need to learn more about it. For those people who do want to learn more about mobile home park investments, give them the best way to reach out.
Yeah, you can check out my website at blueelminvestments.com, or feel free to anytime send me an email to reach out and connect. I love to talk about real estate investing and the mobile home park business. So I'd love to talk to any of your listeners if they want to chat about any of those things.
Your email again is todd@blueelminvestments.com, right?
That's correct.
Excellent, Todd. Listen, thank you for coming on Target Market Insights, the multifamily marketing show. Hope you have a great day and stay in touch, all right?
Thank you, John. Take care.